All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to I guess we're in our fourth Fireside chat here. And I'm really pleased to introduce Lorraine Wilson Drake from Wilson Drake Development. Um, Lorraine and I have had a chance to get connected over the past week or so. It's been a real pleasure to learn about Wilson Drake's development initiatives in Philadelphia and history as a development company. We're going to just kick off a conversation here about the nature of doing this business in Philadelphia and making projects happen. And so without further ado, Lorraine, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about Wilson Drake?
Awesome. Thank you, Stuart, so much. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. So as I was telling you the other day, I sort of fell into development. I grew up in San Francisco, went to school in New York, and then moved to Philadelphia when I got engaged to be married. And the job that I was working in New York only existed in New York, LA, and Chicago. So when I came to Philadelphia, I kind of needed to find something else to do. And sort of at the same time, I decided I wanted to rent an apartment because I really didn't know the city. And I just wanted to rent before, figuring out buying a house. And had a really interesting experience on two levels. So one is I found the rental inventory in Philadelphia when I moved here, which has been 20 years now, just horrible. Like some of the apartments people were putting on the market just like shouldn't be. So it was really bad. And then the other thing that happened to me was I applied for an apartment and was turned down. And even though anybody who knows me knows I keep A+ credit. Like if I not say anything else good about myself, I can tell you, I have good credit. So, I don't know if he turned me down because I was Black, but that's kind of how I felt. So all of that, and then I had just renovated a brownstone in Harlem. Like I bought in Harlem before it was a thing. I didn't have neighbors on either side of me. I did this really cool renovation into a 2-story property and sort of enjoyed that. And so all of that kind of came together and I just started buying vacant buildings in Philadelphia in Graduate Hospital, which is now like totally done. But when I was there, it was like very drug infested, lots of vacant board ups. And it wasn't the place to be back then. But I started buying things, renovating them into multifamily, renting them out, found I liked that. Quickly kind of got priced out of that neighborhood. And so I started going into what people are now calling opportunity zones, like neighborhoods that really needed investment. And we started doing ground up construction because the shells got kind of too expensive. And really kind of built a business of doing that, just, small multifamily buildings. We started out doing duplexes and triplexes. Those are too small. So we got a little bit bigger and we developed this really neat tenant community of people who are mostly Black and brown, although we rent to anybody. Usually they're kind of where I was maybe 40 years ago, coming out of school. This is their first job, tons of student loan debt, probably can't afford to buy a house right now, want somewhere to live that's decent. So our value proposition to them is we'll give you a really nice apartment, but it's probably going to be in a neighborhood that has some challenges. So, the way we kind of keep our rents very moderate is, we buy land really cheap. We do all of our own zoning ourselves and we do very simple construction. So we're able to deliver a product that is really, really nice and keep the rents affordable. And when I say affordable, most of our units are somewhere between $1,200 and $1,600 a piece, but they're built to be shared. So, for people in that category, your kind of housing cost is coming in probably below $800 a month, which in these days and ages with, construction costs being what they are is really good. So we don't do affordable in terms of like Section 8 affordable. We do our own version of affordable, which is if 2 people can come together and share an apartment, that makes it cheaper for everybody. And so that's kind of my story. Love what I do, love the tenant population, have run into challenges. So we've done everything with our own equity, plus bank loans. We don't have any partners. We don't have any investors. We just have kind of been doing our own thing, which has meant that our growth has been really, really stunted. Like we can work on 1, 2, maybe 3 projects at a time, and they're small. And that's about all we can do. So we're at the place now where we probably need to think about different avenues of financing, probably need to think about strategic partnerships in order for us to grow.
That's a fascinating point, and I'm glad that you brought us here because, and I just quickly want to point the audience to the Inquirer article that came out this morning, where Lorraine is featured front and center, and makes the comment, I went to Columbia Business School, and I don't have a rich uncle. I'm not necessarily inherently endowed with the contacts and the relationships that would allow me to build and scale up a real estate development group in the same way. So, I'm really happy to hear what you're sharing here, because it points us in the direction of acknowledging what it looks like to be undercapitalized. I think everyone would acknowledge. I see Sandra in the comments. You have an incredibly deep understanding of your niche in the marketplace. Why can't we capitalize development groups like this more effectively? And so I'm curious, if looking back on your development career after moving from Harlem to Philadelphia, if you had had an opportunity, or you had greater capitalization, do you think you would have pursued development differently?
I think so. I often look back at that. I think I would have sort of gotten places far more quickly. And I'm not really interested in doing sort of huge projects at scale. I'd like to do exactly what I'm doing, but instead of having 1 project going at a time, have 10 projects going at a time. And that could make a really, really huge impact. So one of the things that I found is, one, like we're serving a niche that kind of nobody else really wants to be bothered with. And so I get a great tenant population, and I really feel like I am providing a service and I'm filling a need. But the other thing that happens is this is really transformative for neighborhoods. And so I feel like if we had more capital, we could be more transformative. So for example, in the last, in 2 sessions ago, when you guys were talking to Raheem and Kyle, they talked about how they go around and they talk to community members before they do projects. I do the same thing. I do or knock. I talk to people. I show them what I'm thinking. I adjust it based on, sometimes I adjust it based on information they give me.
Which neighborhoods are you primarily based in?
So let's see. We started out in Graduate Hospital and kind of got gentrified out of it. I know a lot of people don't think of developers as being victims of gentrification, but that's kind of what happened in our situation. The neighborhood grew to a point where the taxes that were assessed on my building couldn't support the kind of development that I was trying to do. So we kind of sold everything in there and kind of moved across the tracks into Point Breeze, and we still have units in Point Breeze. And then we also have units in West Philadelphia, sort of right about 50th Street. We've had them for like 10 years. So when we got there, most people didn't really like to cross 50th Street who were like associated with Penn. But now that neighborhood's kind of really seen a lot of investment and has come a lot of way. Now we're in Germantown, and the way we got to Germantown was we found land to be inexpensive there, at least when we bought it like 18 months ago. We also found sites that were close to public transportation. There's a train station within 2 minutes of the sites that we purchased, and it's also close to the highway. So we thought this would be a good place. And so in 2 square blocks where we looked, there was 13,000 square feet of just vacant land. And that neighborhood hadn't seen any new investment in a really, really long time. So we bought 3 sites in Germantown, looking to purchase a 4th and thinking about a 5th, but we've kind of gone as far as our little piece of capital can take us without taking in additional investment. So that's where we're active. Love being those parts of the community. And I think the point that I was going to make was when I was door knocking and talking to some of the people in the neighborhood, a lot of times they talk to you about crime and how vacancy really kind of breeds crime. And I remember at one point there was kind of a couple of neighbors going back and forth, and one of the neighbors was like, geez, what are we even arguing about? Like, somebody got killed like a couple of, blocks down. Like, we need this investment. So love being in those kind of neighborhoods where you can have that kind of impact, where you can put a building, where you can put lighting, where you can put new pavement, and really see it being transformative for a neighborhood and not displace anybody.
Yeah, those are all critical points. I think you've touched on components of your model that are conducive to co-living. You've touched on community engagement, which is critical for developing like a cultural competence and a community-informed approach. And you've also touched on affordability. And we haven't even gotten into a conversation explicitly about impact yet. And I do want to make sure we turn to that before the end of the session. But what I'd love to do is maybe go into one of the projects that you're working on now, and kind of just so that the audience can get an idea of how your business has matured over time, and we've heard about where you've come from, and now I think we'd be really interested to see where you're going.
Sure. Fiona, you want to put up a visual? I think it's coming. So while she's doing that, I'll just kind of say, oh, there we go. So this is kind of my current project. This is the first site that we're building out in Germantown. So at the top, you have sort of the architectural rendering. And at the bottom, you have the sort of in progress photo. This is kind of where we are. We're almost done with the exterior and we're moving on the interior. So this is a 14-unit apartment building. The budget for this is about $2 million. We brought our own capital to this, and then we got a bank loan with some very good terms. So I'm interest only until I finish it. And these apartments, they're going to be really nice, and we're really targeting that $1,200 to $1,500 a month rent in here. And this project is large enough to sustain some of the things that we've come up against before, like when our project comes off tax abatement, not being able to have enough units to really kind of support the increase in taxes. So this is where I was talking about where, there's tons and tons of vacant land. And just want to point out a couple of things. So when we bring buildings to the community, we try to bring things that, like we would actually want to live in. So we try not to make it look like affordable housing. So we try to, have some brick on our exterior and do some of the more modern elements that are kind of popular in Philadelphia and kind of couple the two. So we're working here, and we got 2 other projects in the pipeline that are very similar, a little bit smaller on Germantown Avenue. And then we're also working on, one of the things that I think about a lot is how to keep Philadelphia affordable for working people. So we're in the process of securing some city land where we'll be doing entry-level housing, just very basic 2-story houses that can be sold to entry-level buyers. Huge demand for that. Very hard to do with construction costs kind of where they are these days, but we're gonna see where we go with that. And then another sort of one of my projects that's kind of on my wish list, I was on a Zoom call, and one of the council people was talking about how they would love to have housing that could be affordable for SEPTA drivers in their district. And I have this project that I want to bring to market, which is selling duplex units. So you have an owner's unit and you have a rental unit at the bottom, which allows people to, when you go for a mortgage, you're able to count that rental income as part of your income when you're purchasing these. So essentially, it kind of takes people who might be in the $70,000, $80,000 a year job and allows them to buy more house because they have a rental unit to offset it. The other thing it does is it kind of builds and creates wealth in our community, because one of the biggest issues that we have, not just with Black developers, but the Black community in general, is that wealth creation has just not happened for us. And one of the easiest ways to create wealth is to help somebody into a home. So those are kind of the things that I'm working on and the things that I think about, kind of moving forward.
Nice. Thanks for that project overview. That looks amazing. I'm curious, who do you interface with most consistently, whether you're working with a buyer or a potential tenant? Like, what's your sort of traditional customer profile?
Oh, so actually, I know this because I actually just looked at it. So probably like between 25, 35. Lot of typically college educated, not all. I've got some barbers, I've got some Uber drivers, but typically college educated, typically good amount of debt, typically a decent credit profile, not perfect, but decent, and typically stays average 2 to 3 years, but I've got some tenants that I've had for like 8 years. Like there's this one woman that I'm thinking of in particular who came in, her and her sister shared an apartment together. Her sister moved to Seattle. When she first moved in, her sister was really the income person, but her career has progressed and she's grown and she's still there. And I love that she's still there. Because I don't know that everybody would have rented to her in the beginning.
Interesting. We've been hearing recurring themes about a housing crisis, a shortage of housing availability, and then an affordability crisis, so a shortage of affordable housing. So it's encouraging to hear the sort of profile of your typical customer, and something that I know is facing Philadelphia is something that we talk about, brain drain, or high capacity, talented people who have a real passion and aptitude for work leaving the city, and we have to ask ourselves, I think, what role does a lack of accessible housing play in that, and how do we keep people involved and engaged in the city? You mentioned something earlier about door knocking, and talking to people in the communities where your projects are based, and something I've found remarkable across the Fireside Chats today is the almost aptitude for community engagement, community organizing that is been shown across the spectrum. And when we talk about impact on a high level, there's often a tendency to go into international creeds about what is impact, what is social impact, right. Or sort of overly corporate language. But what was remarkable to me in hearing you speak a few days ago about your strategy, which is to buy land at a low basis and build housing that's affordable to middle income people. That to me spells a high impact development strategy. But I wonder if has social impact or economic impact or environmental impact always been a part of your development strategy, or is it just part of is the impact that you're having just a default of your business model?
No, it's totally a part of my strategy. So I think I mentioned I'm from San Francisco. So in San Francisco, there are like no vacant lots, like none. Like you just don't see vacant lots. You don't see communities that look like some of the communities in Philadelphia. So I think one of the things that struck me was this doesn't have to be this way, and I can prove it. And I knew you could, and from my experience in Harlem, I knew you could come in and you could do things that made it better. So that I definitely knew. And it's definitely, I definitely think about that. And for some reason, I think because I like my tenant population a lot, I think about them a lot. And a lot of them need to move, but can't because they can't find a house to buy. So, and I go back and forth with them. I'm like, dude, I send them listings like, this might be good for you guys. And it's really hard for people to take that next step. So I've spent time thinking about that. I've tested a few concepts. Every now and then we do some houses to sell or flip when we need to raise capital, because this is very patient capital. So one of the other reasons why I don't have a partner is because everybody doesn't get this. You know, we're kind of asset good, but cash poor. You know, we put our money in, and eventually, you know, when we start, we can't get the appraisal that we could get if the building were, you know, 20 blocks in another direction. So it's a really patient approach. And then we keep the buildings that we build. We don't turn them over. We don't sell them unless we're like forced to. So, you know, it definitely is a different approach. I didn't come to real estate from a real estate background. I'm just like looking at people who have a need, and I'm trying to help them with it. So I'm really interested in that next phase where I can figure out how to help the people who currently live with me buy a house and start to create wealth.
We had a thank you for that. Really interesting to hear. We had a question in the chat from Glenn Gray. Is the townhouse? Glenn, I think you're asking about the project that we just had up on screen. Is the townhouse with rental units classified as an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit?
Is he asking about the project that I just put up?
Yeah, I think so.
No, so it is. And I'm not going to use the correct wording, but I'm just going to tell you what it is. So, yes, so the building sits on the ground floor, and it's accessible, but the units are not. The units are able to be converted. The ones on the first floor are able to be converted if they needed to be, but they currently are not. And I don't know if that answers his question.
I'm not sure either, but if there's an outstanding follow-up, I'm sure we can find a way to make sure it's the loop gets closed. But you know, curious, I'm going to take a note out of my co-director Karen Blank's book and ask, looking forward, you know, I think we're getting a sense of where you're headed. But if you could spell out some of the sort of short and long-term goals for Wilson Drake, I'd be really interested to hear.
So I think, so our goals are to sort of scale a little bit, meaning being able to run multiple projects at the same time. I think we like what we're doing, and we want to keep doing what we're doing. And then I would say to add a component where we're looking at doing housing, entry-level housing that people can afford. I think the pandemic has sort of exacerbated a lot of things that are going on. So we always like to talk about having an affordable housing crisis in Philly. We also have an income problem in Philly, whereas, you know, I can build a house, but, you know, if the person doesn't have the income to sustain it, it's kind of all for naught. So I'm hoping, and I don't know that I can work at the bottom end of the market. We're just kind of not equipped for that. But I really hope we can work at the middle part of the market, where people who are here, who have jobs, who just need kind of a boost to get into something. So going forward, I hope we can kind of play in that market in terms of helping them buy houses so that they can start to create wealth.
That's very, very admirable. You know, I think in the conversations around equitable development, we talk about the value and the multiplier effect of building mixed income communities, not just from a stabilization standpoint of increasing the tax base, which cities seem to favor, but also from the standpoint of sort of cultural exchange and shared dialogue between neighbors and community members that can take place. And it seems like really what Wilson Drake is doing is creating housing in neighborhoods that would benefit from a bit more stability and benefit from new residents having a high degree of cultural competence and interest in being in a community.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so 75% of our tenants are Black and brown, but we got some of everybody. Like we're the UN, and so people do come together and learn to live together, and that is a really good thing. And yeah, so we've learned that having just communities, sticking poor people in a corner all by themselves is not a good strategy, and so I'm really hoping that as we move forward, we learn how to do, communities that have people of all different kinds of income. I think that's really important.
Yeah, certainly. Lorraine, I think that is kind of taking us to the end of our time. Even though we're a few minutes early, I think we're at a natural conclusion point, and I'm going to go ahead and offer to give people a few minutes back. And just want to say thanks so much for your time. I want to encourage everyone to check in on the Inquirer article that came out today, which features Lorraine and Lorraine's work. And go ahead and check out their website too, which details some of their ongoing projects. This session is recorded, and we'll be sure to play a role with 17 and making sure that folks can connect if they want to through this platform. So again, thanks everyone for attending. Lorraine, thanks so much for coming and sharing your insights and knowledge with us. And have a great rest of the convening.
Thanks, Stuart. This has been great. Thank you so much.